The morning begins long before the sun has fully decided to rise. Above the sleeping city, the sky rests in a quiet shade between charcoal and silver, a color so soft it feels almost imagined, as though the night is reluctant to release its hold on the world below. A thin mist drifts slowly over the narrow streets of medieval London, curling gently around timber-framed houses whose upper stories lean toward one another like old friends sharing a secret across the lane. Nothing moves quickly here. Nothing needs to. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and yesterday's rain, mingled with the lingering smoke of banked hearth fires that have glowed softly through the night. Somewhere, unseen, the great river breathes, the Thames rolling steadily onward in its ancient rhythm, its dark surface smoothing itself beneath the paling sky. For now, the city sleeps, and in its sleep it is peaceful, where later there will be clatter and bargaining, hooves striking stone, merchants calling, children laughing, and bells ringing insistently through the day. Now there is only stillness, a rare and delicate stillness that settles over London like a woolen blanket. Listen closely. There is the faint creak of timber adjusting to the coolness of dawn, the quiet drip of water from a roof's edge, the soft rustle of straw somewhere inside a stable as a horse shifts its weight, not yet ready to wake. Along the unpaved edges of the street, shallow puddles reflect the dim light of the brightening sky, their surfaces undisturbed. If one were to walk here, slowly, very slowly, and boots might press gently into the mud, leaving prints that would remain until the city stirred and softened them again. But no one walks just yet. Even the wind seems careful not to disturb the silence. A narrow alley leads toward the marketplace, empty now, though the wooden stalls stand patiently in rows, their awnings tied closed like folded wings. One can almost sense their memory of yesterday. Baskets of onions, wheels of cheese, bundles of herbs. Yet this memory, too, rests quietly. Patience is everywhere. Waiting is everywhere. From a small upper window, faint amber light flickers. Somewhere inside, an early baker has risen, guided not by clock but by habit formed over countless mornings. The oven has been coaxed back to life, embers stirred, fresh wood added with care. Soon the scent of bread will drift outward, warm, yeasty, comforting, but not yet, for now the aroma is only a promise. The baker moves slowly, unhurried, hands familiar with each motion. Dough is pressed, folded, turned, and pressed again, the rhythm steady, almost meditative. Outside, no one notices, yet this quiet labor is part of the city's waking breath. A little farther on, near the river stairs, the mist thickens, hovering just above the water. Wooden boats rock gently against their moorings, ropes pulling and relaxing with soft, intermittent sighs. The tide is neither eager nor reluctant. It simply follows the moon's distant guidance. If you listen long enough, you might hear the faint lap of water against the hull, again and again. Slow and steady, slow and steady. A lone gull glides overhead, its wings barely moving, its pale shape momentarily visible against the lightening sky before dissolving into the haze. Its cry is soft, not the sharp clamor of midday, but something quieter, as if even the birds understand that morning should unfold gently. Near the city wall, a watchman completes the final stretch of his night patrol. His lantern glows low now, the flame shrinking as dawn approaches. He pauses, perhaps leaning lightly on his spear, allowing himself a long breath of cool air. His work is nearly done. Soon another will take his place. But in this moment between duties, he stands very still, listening to the silence he has guarded. From the direction of a small parish church comes the faintest stir, not yet the ringing of bells, only the subtle preparation for it. Inside, unseen hands may be lighting candles, their flames steady and golden, pushing back the shadows one small circle at a time. The stone walls hold the night's chill, yet the space feels calm, timeless, sacred in its quiet. The streets curve gently through the city, some broad enough for carts, others scarcely wider than outstretched arms. Overhead, wooden beams create shifting patterns, and as the sky brightens little by little, these shapes soften. Gray becomes pearl. Pearl becomes pale blue. It happens so slowly that one hardly notices. And yet, everything changes. A shutter opens somewhere with a muted wooden knock, then another. No voices follow, only the simple acknowledgement that the day is approaching. At the edge of a courtyard, a cat steps lightly across the stones, its paws silent, its tail tracing the air behind it. It pauses, listening, sensing the calm that still belongs to these early hours. Finding no disturbance, it continues on, disappearing beneath a cart. Even the animals seem to understand the gentleness of this time. Smoke begins to rise in thin threads from a few chimneys, ascending straight upward in the windless air. The smell is comforting, oak, ash, the faint sweetness of peat, a scent repeated morning after morning after morning. So familiar it becomes almost invisible to those who live within it. Yet if you pause to notice, it is deeply soothing. The eastern sky brightens further, and with that brightness comes a gradual revealing. Roof tiles emerge from shadow. The uneven textures of plaster walls become clearer. Iron hinges catch the light with a dull glow. Nothing is harsh. Nothing is sudden. Dawn does not arrive. It unfolds. Near a well, a woman steps quietly from her doorway, shawl wrapped close around her shoulders. She lowers a bucket with practiced care, the rope sliding with a soft whisper against the stone lip. Down it goes. Then the gentle splash. Then the slow return upward. Water, cold and clear, reflecting the newborn light. She moves without haste, as though aware that quick motions might disturb the fragile peace still resting over the city. Not far away, a rooster considers the morning. Then, finally, it calls. The sound travels farther than one might expect in the stillness. Yet it does not break the calm. It simply becomes part of it. Another thread woven into the widening tapestry of daybreak. A second rooster answers, more distant, then quiet again. The baker's door opens briefly, releasing the first true wave of warmth into the street. It drifts outward, wrapping itself gently around the cool air. Soon there will be customers, soft greetings, coins exchanged. But for now, the fragrance exists simply for its own sake. Bread for the waking world. The river mist begins to thin, lifting gradually as if drawn upward by invisible hands. Boats become clearer, their outlines steady, their reflections trembling slightly in the slow current. Oars knock faintly against wood. Somewhere, a fisherman prepares his nets, each movement deliberate, unhurried, familiar. Above, the sky now holds a tender wash of rose. It deepens almost imperceptibly. Time in these moments feels wide and generous. The watchman turns toward home. The woman carries her water inside. The cat curls into itself. And still the city wakes only by degrees. A cartwheel shifts slightly as someone inside a nearby stable prepares for the day. Though the horse remains calm, its breath visible in small clouds. A hand strokes its neck, slow and reassuring. There is no urgency here, only beginning. Then, very softly, the church bell rings once. Not loudly, not insistently, just a single note, round and lingering, floating outward, over rooftops and narrow lanes, dissolving into the brightening air. It is less a command than a reminder. Morning has come. Light now touches the highest points of the city wall, then slides downward, brushing against windows, warming the damp stones, catching in the droplets left by the night. Each surface receives it quietly. Each surface glows. And as this light spreads, the silence gently transforms. Not disappearing, but thinning, making room for footsteps yet to come, for voices that will rise and fall throughout the hours ahead. But for just a little longer, the hush remains. If you were to stand here, breathing slowly, listening without effort, you might feel the deep steadiness of a city that has awakened this way for generations. Morning after morning, season after season, always beginning again in softness, always emerging from darkness with patience. The sun finally lifts above the horizon, its edge pale and diffused through the lingering haze. No blaze, no spectacle, only a quiet assurance that the day is ready. In medieval London, still stretching gently from its sleep, receives the light without resistance. Another morning, another calm unfolding, another slow and certain start. Long before the horizon begins to pale, before even the earliest birds have gathered the courage to test their voices against the night, the baker wakes. He does not wake suddenly. There is no sharp break between sleep and rising, only a slow returning, as though his awareness drifts upward through layers of quiet darkness until it reaches the surface of the world once more. For a few moments, he lies still beneath the weight of his woolen blanket, listening. The room is nearly black, shaped only by faint outlines. The angled beam above, the simple stool beside the bed, the small window whose shutter allows in the thinnest seam of starlight. The air carries a lingering chill, the kind that gathers in stone walls during the night and waits patiently for morning fires. He breathes in, slowly, and out again. The rhythm is steady, familiar, like the tide that returns again and again to the same shore. There's comfort in this hour, a deep, enveloping comfort that belongs only to those who rise before the rest of the world has remembered itself. For a little while longer, he listens to the silence. It is not empty silence, never truly empty, but filled with the smallest of sounds, the faint settling of wood, a distant shifting somewhere below, perhaps the quiet sigh of the building adjusting to the coolness before dawn. Beside the hearth, yesterday's ashes rest in a soft gray cradle. Beneath them, hidden but faithful, few embers still glow, waiting. The baker sits up slowly, the blanket folding back with a muted rustle. His feet meet the floor, and the cold of it travels upward in a gentle reminder that the fire must soon be coaxed awake. He pauses there, seated at the edge of the bed, allowing his body to arrive fully in the morning. There is no need to hurry. There is never any need to hurry at this hour. He reaches for his linen shirt, pulling it on with practiced ease, the fabric cool at first, but warming quickly. Each movement is unthinking, shaped by years upon years of identical mornings that began in darkness and unfolded always toward warmth and bread. Routine for him is not monotony. It is a kind of quiet devotion. He lifts the shutter slightly. Outside, the sky is still deep and star-washed, yet along the farthest edge of the world, there is the faintest softening, a charcoal gray that hints gently at what is to come. The street below is empty. Even the cats are sleeping. Even the wind seems to rest. He lowers the shutter once more and makes his way downstairs, one hand brushing lightly along the familiar wall. Each step of the wooden stair offers a subdued creak, not loud enough to disturb the peace, only enough to acknowledge his passing. Below, the bakery waits. Dark now, but not for long. The scent of flour lingers everywhere, settled into the grain of the tables, softened into the very air. It is a pale, comforting smell, joined by the faint sweetness of old loaves and the memory of smoke. He kneels before the hearth. For a moment, he simply watches the embers, small constellations glowing quietly in their bed of ash. With a careful hand, he gathers kindling, thin twigs first, then slightly thicker pieces, arranging them with the attentiveness of someone who understands that fire, like morning, prefers to be invited rather than commanded, a breath, a spark encouraged, a gentle stirring. Soon, a thread of smoke curls upward, hesitant at first, then steadier. A small flame appears, flickers, nearly disappears, then returns with greater confidence, its light painting the nearby stones in warm amber tones. The chill begins, almost immediately, to retreat. Not quickly. Just enough, he holds it, his hands toward the growing warmth, turning them slowly. Feeling life return to his fingers. There is something deeply reassuring in this first the way it transforms darkness without violence. The way it spreads its comfort outward in widening circles. Behind him, the dough trough waits empty, but not for long. He measures the flour by feel more than sight, letting it fall softly into the bowl with a hushed, powdery sound, like the quietest snowfall imaginable. Water follows, then salt, then the small portion of yesterday's starter, preserved carefully, faithfully, as bakers have done for generations beyond counting. His hands enter the mixture, cool, silken, yielding. He folds the dough slowly, pressing it forward, turning it back upon itself, pressing again. The movement becomes rhythmic, almost tidal. Forward and return, Emotion so steady it feels less like work and more like breathing. Time stretches gently. The world beyond the walls remains asleep, yet here in this modest pool of firelight, creation has already begun. As the dough thickens, it warms beneath his palms. The scent shifts, no longer just flour and water, but the earliest whisper of bread to be. He pauses now and then, not from fatigue, but simply to rest his hands and listen. Sometimes the quiet speaks most clearly when one is still. Far away, perhaps from the direction of the river, comes the faintest suggestion of water touching wood. Then nothing again. The flame strengthens. Shadows retreat to the corners. A soft gold begins to replace the night inside the room. He shapes the dough into rounds and sets them aside beneath cloth, where they will rest and rise in their own patient time. Bread cannot be rushed. It responds only to care and waiting. Waiting is part of the craft. Waiting is part of the peace. Drawn by habit, he opens the door just a fraction. Cool air slips inside, brushing his face, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and the fragile, almost imperceptible promise of dawn. The sky is lightened by a shade so subtle one might miss it entirely without looking twice. Still no footsteps. Still no voices. Only that vast, shared quiet that belongs to the hour before sunrise. He closes the door gently and returns to the oven, feeding it thicker logs now. The fire accepts them with a soft crackle, sparks spiraling upward briefly before vanishing. Heat gathers. The stones begin their slow absorption. Soon they will hold enough warmth to transform pale dough into crusted loaves, firm, fragrant, sustaining. He moves unhurriedly through each preparation, wiping the table, aligning his tools, brushing stray flour into neatness. There is a calm satisfaction in readiness. Outside, the darkness loosens its grip. Gray becomes pearl. Pearl leans toward blue. The change is so gradual, it feels less like a transition and more like a remembering, as though the world is recalling its colors one by one. A bird tests a single note, then thinks better of it. Silence returns. The baker allows himself a small cup of watered ale, not for indulgence but for steadiness. He drinks slowly, feeling its mild warmth follow the path the fire has already begun within him. Another breath, another quiet moment. When at last the first loaf slides into the oven, it does so with a muted assurance, disappearing into the glow. Many will follow, each placed with the same gentle precision. Soon, not yet, but soon, the fragrance will travel outward into the lane, curling through the waking streets, guiding early risers toward nourishment. But for now, it belongs only to him. This hour, this stillness, this simple, faithful beginning. And as the very first edge of the sun approaches the unseen horizon, the baker stands beside his fire, surrounded by warmth he has patiently built, listening to the last deep breaths of night as they fade softly into morning. The stone oven waits in the half-light, silent and patient, as it has waited through countless nights before this one. Its curved mouth is dark now, a quiet hollow shaped by fire and time, its interior cool to the touch, holding only the memory of yesterday's warmth. The stones are thick and steady, layered one upon another with careful hands long ago, each one placed with the understanding that heat must be held gently, slowly, and without haste. Before any flame appears, there is a moment of stillness. The air inside the bakery is cool, touched by the faint scent of ash and flour, the kind of scent that lingers long after the last loaf has been drawn out, and the door closed for the night. Outside, the world has not yet stirred. The sky remains a deep shade of quiet gray, and the silence feels wide and generous. The baker approaches the oven without hurry. He kneels before it, resting one palm lightly against the stone arch. It is cold now. Not harshly so, but with the firm, neutral coolness of stone that has released all it carried the day before. He leaves his hand there for a breath or two, feeling the texture beneath his skin, faintly rough, faintly worn, shaped by years of careful use. Lighting a stone oven is never rushed. It is a conversation between flame and rock, a persuasion, a gradual awakening. He begins by clearing the hearth floor, brushing aside the pale gray ash that has settled into gentle drifts overnight. The sound is soft, a faint whisper of bristles against stone, a quiet gathering of yesterday's remnants into a small, careful pile. There is something soothing about this preparation, an unspoken understanding that before new warmth can be built, the old must be tended to respectfully. The ash is carried away. The oven mouth stands empty now, a hollow awaiting its first flicker. He gathers kindling, thin, dry twigs that snap easily between his fingers, small splinters of wood that will catch flame without resistance. They are arranged inside the oven with care, not stacked too tightly, not too loosely, but in a shape that allows air to move freely between them. Air is essential. Air is patient. The first spark comes quietly, a touch of flint, a small bloom of light. For a moment, nothing happens. Then a thread of smoke curls upward, hesitant and pale, drifting lazily toward the curved ceiling of the oven. Before spilling outward into the room, the baker waits. He does not force the flame. He shields it gently with his hand, allowing it to gather strength in its own time. A faint crackle begins, almost shy at first, as the smallest pieces of wood accept the warmth and surrender to it. The flame appears, small, wavering, golden at its core, and edged in faint blue. It licks carefully at the kindling, testing each surface. Slowly, steadily. The oven breathes differently now. The cool stillness begins to shift, replaced by the delicate warmth of something newly alive. The scent of smoke fills the air, clean and woody, with a subtle sweetness that clings softly to the stone walls and rises in thin, translucent ribbons. More kindling is added, each piece laid gently atop the growing ember bed. The flame strengthens, not in leaps, but in gradual pulses, as though learning the shape of its space. It stretches toward the back wall, touches the side stones, withdraws, then returns again with more confidence. The baker watches carefully. Lighting a stone oven is not simply about heat. It is about evenness, about patience. The stones must warm slowly, absorbing the energy of the flame without cracking or resisting. Too much heat too quickly can startle them. They prefer a gradual awakening, a steady climb from cool to warm, from warm to hot. He shifts the small fire slightly to one side, allowing warmth to begin spreading across the floor. The stones closest to the flame darken first, their surfaces changing subtly as moisture evaporates and heat settles within them. The transformation is quiet, almost imperceptible. If one were to touch the inner wall, gently, cautiously, the difference would be felt before it could be seen. Outside the oven, the air of the room grows warmer by degrees. The chill recedes from the corners, softened by the steady radiance of the fire. Shadows flicker across the curved interior, dancing lightly as the flames stretch and bend. The crackle deepens. Wood shifts. Embers glow brighter, their color deepening from dull red to vibrant orange. The baker adds slightly thicker pieces now. Not large logs yet, but wood substantial enough to carry the flame forward. Each addition is placed with intention, angled so the fire can climb upward naturally, without being smothered. The oven hums softly. A low, almost inaudible sound as heat begins to move through stone, traveling outward and upward in widening arcs. The dome above slowly absorbs this energy, its pale surface beginning to lighten as soot burns away. This whitening is a sign, a quiet milestone. When the soot clears from the stone, it means the temperature is rising steadily, evenly as it should. But there's no hurry to reach that point. The baker sits back slightly, allowing the fire to work in its own rhythm. He breathes in the scent of oak and ash, of warming stone and ancient craft. His movements are unhurried, almost meditative. Fire teaches patience. Stone demands it. The sky outside shifts almost imperceptibly toward morning, though inside the oven, the only light is flame. The world beyond may still be wrapped in soft gray, but here, within this curved chamber of brick and mortar, sunrise has already begun. The fire grows stronger. Its voice becomes steadier. Larger logs are introduced now, one at a time, laid gently onto the glowing bed of embers. The flames rise higher, reaching toward the dome's peak, painting the interior in bright, shifting gold. Heat deepens. It radiates outward in slow waves, warming the baker's hands even from where he sits. He adjusts the logs carefully, using a long wooden peel to nudge them into place. Sparks rise briefly, spiral upward, and vanish against the curved ceiling. There is a rhythm to this process. Add, wait, listen, observe, adjust, add again. No sudden movements. No force, only attention. Gradually, the stones change. Their cool gray tone fades into a lighter shade as soot burns clean away, leaving behind a pale, almost luminous surface. This whitening spreads across the dome in irregular patches, like clouds thinning to reveal clear sky. The oven is waking, fully now. The baker continues feeding the fire until the heat has soaked deeply into every surface. He knows this not by measuring tools, but by feel. By the way the air shimmers faintly near the opening. By the way the floor radiates warmth even before direct flame touches it. At last, when the stones have absorbed all they need, the fire is allowed to settle. The logs are drawn to one side. The flames lower, though the heat remains strong, steady, unwavering. The oven no longer feels hollow. It feels alive, breathing warmth outward, holding it, keeping it ready. The interior glows with a quiet intensity, not fierce, not wild, but calm and contained. The crackling softens into the gentle shifting of embers, a steady pulse that will sustain the baking to come. Lighting a stone oven is not about ignition alone. It is about transformation, about coaxing cold rock into radiant warmth, about guiding flame into partnership with earth. The baker rests for a moment, watching the final traces of soot fade from the dome, leaving it clean and pale. The oven stands prepared now, not rushed, not startled, but fully, patiently warmed. And in the steady glow of embers, the promise of bread lingers softly in the air. The dough rests upon the wooden table like something newly born into the world, pale and soft and unformed, a quiet mound of flour and water that has only just begun to understand its own becoming. The room is still hushed in the early light, the air faintly warm from the oven's steady breath, and across the broad grain of the table, a dusting of flour lies like the thinnest veil of snow. Nothing moves quickly here, nothing needs to. The baker places both hands upon the dough. For a moment he does not press. He simply feels. The surface is cool and slightly tacky, yielding beneath his palms with a softness that carries no resistance. There's a faint elasticity already, a promise, hidden within its pale folds. But it is not yet strong, not yet ready. Kneading begins slowly. One hand pushes forward, gently but firmly, stretching the dough away across the table. The other hand steadies it, guiding its movement so it does not tear. The dough elongates, thins, resists just slightly, then relaxes. Fold. The far edge is brought back towards the center, layered upon itself like cloth being carefully arranged. Turn. A quarter rotation. And again, push, fold, turn. The rhythm settles into place, not hurried, not forced, but steady and unbroken like breathing. Push, fold, turn. Each motion presses air into the dough, aligns the invisible strands of gluten that form within it, strengthening them little by little. At first the texture is uneven, faintly lumpy in places, softer in others. The hands smooth it patiently, coaxing it toward uniformity. There is no need to rush strength into it. Strength comes through repetition, through gentle insistence. The sound is soft, the faint whisper of dough against wood, the quiet thud as it meets the table again after each fold. Flour lifts lightly into the air, then settles once more, almost imperceptible. Push, fold, turn. The baker leans his weight into the motion, not with force, but with steadiness, allowing his body to guide the pressure. His palms press outward, stretching the dough in a long, smooth line. His fingers curl beneath the edge to bring it back, again and again. The dough begins to change beneath his touch. Where it once clung loosely to his skin, it now pulls away more cleanly. Where it once sagged shapelessly, it begins to hold itself with quiet confidence. The surface grows smoother, less fragmented, more cohesive. The transformation is gradual. So gradual it might go unnoticed without attention. Yet the hands know. The hands feel. There's a gentle warmth building within the dough now. Not from heat alone, but from movement, from friction, from the energy transferred through steady palms. The baker's breathing aligns with the rhythm of his work, slow and even. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. The dough stretches farther now before resisting. When lifted, it drapes softly, but no longer collapses entirely. It remembers its shape. That memory is strength forming. A faint sheen appears across its surface, smooth and almost luminous in the growing morning light. The rough patches disappear, absorbed into the whole. What was once a mixture becomes a single, unified mass. There is something deeply calming in this repetition. The mind does not wander far. It follows the hands, it follows the rhythm. Push, fold, turn. The table bears the marks of years of such movements. Faint indentations worn into the grain, polished smooth where palms have pressed countless times before. This act has been repeated across generations, each baker guiding flour and water into nourishment with the same patient devotion. The dough resists a little more now, not stubbornly, simply with strength. When pressed forward, it springs back slightly as though testing its own elasticity. The baker adjusts his pressure accordingly, allowing the resistance to guide him rather than oppose him. Push more gently, fold more deliberately, turn with care. The surface grows taut and supple, like fabric drawn smoothly across a frame. When the baker presses a finger lightly into its center, the indentation slowly rises again, the dough breathing back into itself. This is the sign. But he continues. Not because it is necessary, but because the rhythm is soothing, because there is comfort in the steady repetition. The scent in the room is subtle, flour and yeast mingling softly, the faintest hint of fermentation beginning to awaken. It is not yet the rich aroma of baked bread, but something quieter, more delicate. Potential. The baker pauses briefly, allowing the dough to rest for a breath or two. It relaxes immediately, spreading ever so slightly across the table. Then his hands return. Push, fold, turn. The movements grow almost meditative now, the boundaries between action and awareness dissolving into a simple flow. The outside world remains distant, still quiet in the early hour. And here within this small space, time feels wide and unhurried. With each repetition, the dough grows more alive. It no longer feels like separate ingredients. It feels whole. When lifted, it holds together in a smooth, rounded shape. When stretched between the fingers, it forms a thin membrane that catches the light before gently yielding. The baker gathers it into a ball, tucking the edges beneath so the top becomes taut and rounded. He cups it lightly between his palms, rotating it against the table in small circles to build surface tension. The motion is gentle, circular, calm. The dough responds, tightening subtly, smoothing further, its surface now almost silky beneath his hands. At last, he sets it down. It rests there quietly, breathing in its own silent way, ready to rise. There is flour upon his palms, a light dusting that softens the lines of his skin. He brushes it away with an easy motion, leaving faint impressions across the table's surface. The dough waits now for time to do its work. But the kneading, that steady, rhythmic guiding from formlessness to strength, has given it what it needs. Push, fold, turn. The echoes of the motion linger even after the hands have grown still, as though the rhythm continues somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter. In the hush of the morning, beneath the slow brightening of the sky, the simple act of kneading has shaped more than bread. It has shaped calm. It has shaped patience. It has shaped something steady and sustaining. And the dough rests, smooth and ready, in the soft, golden light. Before the sun fully clears the horizon, the city lingers in a delicate space between sleep and stirring, as though it is reluctant to let go of the soft hush that cradled it through the night. The rooftops remain washed in pale gray, their outlines softened by a thin veil of morning mist that drifts lazily through narrow streets and along quiet courtyards. The air is cool and slightly damp, carrying the faint scent of stone, of soot long settled, of earth that has breathed out the night's moisture. Nothing begins all at once. The waking is gradual, unfolding. From somewhere deep within a timber-framed house, a floorboard creaks under a careful step. The sound is small, almost private, yet in the stillness, it seems to ripple outward, as though the building itself has acknowledged the coming day. A shutter opens a fraction, then closes again, then opens fully, allowing a blade of early light to slip inside and lay itself gently across the floor. In another home, a kettle is lifted from its hook and set upon embers, coaxed quietly back to life. The faint crackle of rekindled fire adds a subtle warmth to the air, mingling with the lingering coolness of dawn. The city does not rise with urgency. It rises with familiarity. In a stable tucked behind a narrow lane, a horse shifts its weight, hooves brushing softly against packed earth. Its breath forms small, fading clouds that dissolve into the dim interior. A hand strokes its flank, slow and reassuring, and the animal settles once more, calm beneath the touch. Along the river's edge, the mist thins by degrees, lifting upward as if drawn by invisible threads. The surface of the water, once dark and glass-like, begins to reflect pale streaks of rose and silver from the brightening sky. A boat rope strains gently against its post. Wood taps lightly against wood. The river breathes, and with it so does the city. From a distant tower, a bell rings once. Not loudly, not insistently, just a single, rounded note that carries softly across rooftops and chimneys, dissolving into the widening morning. The sound does not command, it invites. In a small courtyard, a woman steps outside with a shawl wrapped close around her shoulders. She pauses for a moment, looking upward at the sky that has shifted now from gray to a tender wash of blue. The air brushes cool against her face, and she inhales slowly before turning toward her morning tasks. Across the lane, another door opens. Then another. Footsteps begin to appear. Not hurried, not heavy, but measured and unassuming. Leather soles press against damp earth, leaving faint impressions that will soon be softened by passing traffic. The marketplace, empty only moments before, begins its quiet transformation. A wooden stall creaks as its awning is untied and lowered. The canvas falls into place with a muted sigh, shaking loose a few lingering droplets from the night's condensation. Baskets are carried out and set down one by one, their contents still covered for now. Patience lingers here, too. Nothing is rushed into display. A baker's door opens briefly, releasing a gentle wave of warmth into the street. The scent of fresh bread drifts outward, wrapping itself around the cool air in a comforting embrace. It spreads slowly, curling around corners, slipping through open windows, finding its way toward those who have begun to stir. A cat crosses the lane with quiet assurance, tail lifted, paws barely disturbing the ground. It pauses near a doorway, listening, sensing the shift in energy as the city stretches from its sleep. From above, a bird calls, a tentative note, then another. Soon others join, their voices weaving together into a soft tapestry of sound that settles lightly over rooftops and chimneys. The sky grows brighter, not abruptly, but in layers. Gray yields to pearl. Pearl warms into pale gold. The light reaches the highest points first, the edges of roof tiles, the tops of weathered beams, and then gradually descends, brushing against windowsills, warming stone walls, slipping into narrow alleys. Smoke begins to rise in slender threads from chimneys across the city. It climbs steadily upward, in the windless air, thin and wavering, carrying with it the scent of wood and peat and the promise of cooked porridge. Inside homes, bowls are set upon tables, cloaks are lifted from hooks. Children shift beneath blankets before reluctantly sitting upright, blinking into the soft light that now fills the room. In the street, a cartwheel rolls forward with a low, steady rumble. The sound is not jarring, it is absorbed gently by the open air. A horse's hooves follow, striking the ground in a calm and even rhythm. Clip, pause, clip. The driver speaks in a low murmur, more reassurance than instruction, and the animal responds without strain. At the edge of the city, near the gates, a watchman concludes his night's vigil. His lantern glows faintly in the growing daylight, its purpose nearly fulfilled. He pauses for a final look down the lane he has guarded, listening to the soft awakening unfolding around him. Morning has arrived, though it still carries the softness of night. The river now reflects the full blush of dawn. Fishermen untie their boats, their movements deliberate and quiet. Nets are lifted and examined, ropes coiled with patient care. No voice rises above the natural cadence of water and wood. In the marketplace, cloth is draped over tables. Jars are arranged in neat rows, and scales are balanced carefully. A merchant smooths the surface of his stall with the palm of his hand, as though greeting an old companion. Across the city, shutters stand open now, welcoming light into rooms that only moments ago were dim. The hush of early morning has not vanished, has simply changed shape, making room for the low hum of life returning. There is conversation now, soft at first, carried in gentle exchanges between neighbors. Words float easily through the air, unhurried and warm. The city does not erupt into activity. It gathers itself, slowly, surely. A dog barks once, then settles. A bucket is lowered into a well with a muted splash and lifted again, water glistening in the strengthening light. The sun rises higher, its rays touching the stone walls with quiet insistence. The dampness of the night begins to dry, leaving behind a faint sheen that disappears as warmth spreads. The streets, once empty, now hold a steady flow of movement, not crowded, not chaotic, but purposeful and calm. Footsteps, hooves, the rolling of wheels, the rustle of fabric, the distant murmur of trade, all of it layered gently upon the foundation of morning's peace. And yet, even as the day takes shape, something of that early stillness remains, woven into the rhythm of the city, lingering in the spaces between sounds, in the pauses between words. The city has awakened, not suddenly, not sharply, but as a living thing does, stretching, breathing, remembering itself with patience and quiet grace. The sun stands now fully above the horizon, casting a golden warmth across rooftops and lanes. The mist has lifted entirely, revealing the familiar contours of stone and timber in clear light. Another day has begun. Steady, unhurried, alive. The morning has fully arrived now, though it still carries a softness at its edges, a gentleness that lingers in the air before the full weight of the day settles in. The bakery door stands open, not wide, just enough. Enough to let the warmth drift outward in steady, comforting waves, enough to allow the scent of fresh bread, rich, yeasty, slightly sweet, to curl its way along the narrow street and find those who are ready to rise. Inside, the oven breathes a low, steady heat. Loaves rest upon wooden boards, their crusts newly formed, golden and lightly dusted with flour. The room holds a quiet glow, lit by both fire and morning light that filters through the small window, falling across the table in pale bands. The first customer does not arrive with announcement. There is no hurried step, no raised voice, only the soft sound of leather soles against the street. Approaching at an unassuming pace, the figure pauses just outside the door, as though unwilling to disturb the calm within. For a moment, the scent of bread alone is enough. It settles gently in the lungs, warm and reassuring. Then the customer steps inside. The wooden threshold creaks faintly beneath the weight. The baker looks up, offering a small nod. Not exaggerated, not theatrical, simply an acknowledgement shaped by familiarity. There is no need for loud greetings here. The hour itself asks for quiet. The customer, perhaps a woman wrapped in a simple wool cloak, pulls it slightly tighter around her shoulders as she enters, carrying with her the last coolness of the morning air. A basket rests over her arm, lined with cloth in preparation for what she has come to collect. She does not speak at first. Her gaze settles upon the loaves. Steam still rises faintly from their crusts, barely visible, like breath on a cold morning. The surface of each loaf is marked with careful scoring, patterns that have opened slightly in the oven's heat, revealing pale ridges beneath the golden shell. The room smells of warmth, of sustenance, of something steady and dependable. At last she speaks. Her voice is low, shaped by sleep not long shed. The request is simple. 2 loaves, perhaps. Or 1, if the household is small. The words pass easily between her and the baker, carried more by understanding than by sound. The baker selects the bread with deliberate care. He lifts each loaf from the board, weighing it briefly in his hands as though measuring more than just its heaviness. The crust gives a soft crackle beneath his fingers, not brittle, but firm enough to promise a tender crumb within. He places the loaf into her basket. The cloth folds over it, cradling the warmth. Coins are exchanged with a muted clink, the sound softened by the wooden counter. There is no counting aloud, no suspicion or haste. Trust moves between them as naturally as the morning air. She lingers only a moment longer, perhaps allowing the warmth of the bakery to soak into her before stepping back outside. The door closes gently behind her, not fully, but enough to preserve the quiet interior. Outside, the street continues its gradual filling. Another figure approaches, an older man this time, walking with measured steps, his posture steady but unhurried. He removes his cap as he enters, a small courtesy offered without thought. The baker greets him with the same soft nod. This customer speaks even less. He simply gestures toward a loaf set slightly apart from the others, perhaps a darker bread, dense and sustaining. The baker understands. The loaf is wrapped in a square of cloth brought from home, edges folded neatly, corners tucked in with care. The man inhales deeply, almost imperceptibly, as though the scent alone has nourished him. For a moment, they stand in companionable silence. The oven's heat radiates softly against the cool stone floor. The faint crackle of embers shifts the air in subtle pulses. Outside, a cart passes, wheels turning slowly over uneven ground. Inside, time remains wide and unhurried. The second customer leaves. The door opens and closes again, each movement releasing a breath of warmth into the street. The third arrives not long after, a young boy sent on behalf of his family, his hands slightly red from the morning chill. He stands just inside the doorway, eyes wide as they settle upon the rows of bread. There is a quiet awe in his gaze. The baker's expression softens. He kneels slightly to meet the boy's height, listening as the small request is recited carefully, memorized from home. A smaller loaf this time, perhaps a roll, round and lightly browned. The baker places it gently into the boy's waiting hands, wrapping his fingers around it to ensure he holds it securely. The warmth surprises him. He smiles, almost shyly, before offering his coins with deliberate care, counted twice to be certain. The door closes once more, and the street continues to wake. One by one, the first customers arrive. Not in a crowd, not in noise, but in a steady, unbroken rhythm. A seamstress with flour dusting her cuffs. A dock worker with hands roughened by rope and water. A woman carrying a small child who stirs slightly at the scent of bread. Each enters quietly. Each exchanges soft words. Each leaves with warmth, cradled carefully in cloth and basket. The bakery becomes a place of gentle gathering, not of conversation loud or hurried, but of shared beginning. Faces are familiar. Movements are known. The rituals repeat each morning with the same steady cadence. The oven hums. The loaves diminish in number. The light grows brighter across the floor, climbing slowly up the wall as the sun rises higher. Yet even as the day prepares to unfold into fuller activity, these first moments retain their tenderness. There is something sacred in the first customers of the morning, in their unspoken understanding that bread is not simply bought and sold, but received. That warmth matters. That sustenance carries meaning beyond its weight. The baker wipes his hands upon his apron, flour rising in faint clouds that catch the light before settling once more. Outside, more footsteps approach. The city is fully awake now, but inside this small bakery, the calm of early morning lingers just a little longer, woven into each quiet exchange, each careful wrapping of cloth, each loaf lifted gently from the board. The first customers have come and gone, carrying warmth into their homes. And the day continues to open, one soft moment at a time. The market unfolds slowly beneath the widening morning sky, not as a sudden burst of sound or color, but as a gentle gathering of presence, stall by stall, voice by voice, scent by scent, until the square feels quietly alive. The cobblestones underfoot are uneven and cool, still holding a trace of the night's dampness. As you step forward, your boots meet the stone with a muted rhythm, softened by the hum of early trade that has only just begun to weave itself into the air. Nothing here rushes, nothing presses. The market breathes in a steady, unhurried way. Wooden stalls stand in careful rows, their beams rough-hewn and sturdy, awnings stretched overhead, in shades softened by years of sun and rain. Canvas edges stir gently in the light breeze. Shifting shadows across baskets and crates below, you move slowly without destination. Simply walking. Simply noticing. To your left, a greengrocer arranges his wares with patient attention. Round cabbages sit heavy and pale beside bunches of carrots still dusted faintly with soil. Their colors are muted in the morning light. Soft greens, gentle oranges, the deep purple of onions piled in woven baskets. The scent here is earthy and clean. Fresh leaves, turned soil, a faint trace of damp straw beneath the table. The vendor speaks in a low, even voice to the woman standing nearby. Their exchange is measured, almost conversational rather than transactional. Coins pass quietly from hand to hand. A cabbage is lifted, weighed thoughtfully, then settled into a basket lined with cloth. You continue on. The air shifts as you pass a baker's stall, where loaves are stacked in tidy rows. The crusts are golden, lightly floured, some round and full, others long and slender. A faint warmth still radiates from them, carrying the scent of yeast and firewood into the open square. For a moment, you pause. The aroma wraps gently around you, steady and reassuring. Nearby, a child stands on tiptoe to peer over the table's edge, eyes wide with quiet curiosity. The baker offers a small roll, pressing it into waiting hands. A smile flickers, brief, sincere, and the child retreats, clutching the warmth carefully. The market sounds layer softly around you. The creak of wooden wheels as a cart eases through the edge of the square. The light clink of metal scales being balanced. The rustle of fabric as bolts of wool and linen are unrolled across a merchant's table. There are voices, yes, but none raised in urgency. They rise and fall like birdsong, blending into a gentle chorus that never overwhelms. Ahead, a fishmonger stands beside shallow tubs filled with the morning's catch. Silver scales glint faintly in the sunlight, catching and releasing light with each small movement. The scent here is sharper, briny and cool, reminiscent of river mist and wet rope. He rearranges the fish with deliberate hands, laying them neatly atop crushed ice that steams faintly in the warming air. A customer leans closer, examining without haste. Questions are asked softly, answers given simply. Further along, cloth merchants display their wares in muted waves of color: deep indigo, faded crimson, soft brown and cream. The fabrics hang gently, stirred only by the occasional passing breeze. A woman runs her fingers across the length of wool, feeling its texture, weighing its warmth in her palm. The merchant waits without impatience, understanding that touch is part of choosing. You walk on. Your pace remains slow, unhurried. The ground beneath you grows warmer as the sun climbs higher, touching the square with steady light. Shadows shorten gradually, retreating beneath stalls and tables. In the center of the market, a well stands as it has for generations, its stone rim worn smooth by countless hands. A bucket is lowered with a soft scrape of rope against stone, then lifted again, water shimmering briefly before disappearing into a clay jug. The splash echoes faintly, then fades. The scent of herbs drifts toward you next. Thyme and rosemary bundled together, their leaves releasing fragrance as they are handled. Lavender hangs in small clusters, pale and calming. A faint sweetness lingers in the air, mingling with the more robust scents of produce and bread. A woman selects a small bundle, tying it carefully with twine. She brings it briefly to her nose, inhaling slowly, eyes half closed, as though savoring not just the scent, but the moment. The market does not demand attention, it invites it. A blacksmith's stall stands near the edge of the square, though his hammer rests for now. Tools are arranged neatly across the table, Nails, hinges, small iron hooks, their surfaces catching light with a subdued gleam. He wipes his hands upon a cloth, waiting patiently for the next request. A dog weaves through the legs of passers-by, tail wagging lazily. It pauses near a butcher's table, hopeful but calm, then wanders on when no offering comes. The murmur of conversation continues, never rising beyond what the square can comfortably hold. You pass a woman selling honey in small clay pots, their lids sealed with wax. The golden surface beneath glows warmly in the sunlight. She lifts one pot gently, tilting it just enough to show its clarity before setting it down again with care. Further still, baskets of apples form quiet pyramids of red and green. Their skins are slightly mottled, imperfect in ways that feel reassuring. A hand reaches out, turning one slowly, inspecting its weight, its scent. The sky above is clear now, a pale blue stretching wide over rooftops and chimneys. A few clouds drift lazily, their shapes unhurried. As you continue your walk, you notice how the market moves in waves rather than surges. A few more people arrive. A few depart. The space never feels crowded, only gently occupied. Everywhere, there's the rhythm of exchange. Not hurried, strained, simply steady. A musician sits on a low stool near the fountain, plucking softly at a lute. The melody is slow and unassuming, winding its way through the square like a narrow stream. It does not demand applause. It simply exists, filling the spaces between conversation. You pause once more at the edge of the square, turning slowly, taking it in. The wooden stalls, the woven baskets, the soft colors of cloth and produce, the gentle hum of voices rising and falling like distant waves, the warmth of the sun settling into stone. There is no urgency here, only movement shaped by need and familiarity. The market is not loud, it is alive in a quiet way. Alive in the steady exchange of goods and glances, alive in the scent of bread and herbs and river air, alive in the careful weighing of apples and fish and cloth. And as you walk toward the far end of the square, your steps remain slow and measured, blending easily into the rhythm of the place. The market continues behind you, unbroken, a soft tapestry of trade and presence, a calm unfolding beneath the open sky. Bread rested at the very center of medieval life, not as something dramatic or exalted, but as something steady, familiar, and quietly sustaining. It was there in the morning light, placed upon wooden tables worn smooth by generations of hands. It was there at midday, broken and shared in fields, workshops, kitchens, and cloisters. It was there again at evening, when the day's labor had softened into conversation and reflection. Bread was not rare. It was not ceremonial in most moments. It was constant. And in that constancy, it became essential. In a medieval household, bread was nourishment in its most dependable form. Grain, whether wheat, rye, barley, or oats, could be grown, harvested, dried, and stored. Through seasons of abundance and seasons of uncertainty, grain held the promise of sustenance. And from grain came flour, and from flour came bread. The process was patient and repetitive, like the turning of the year itself. Fields were plowed slowly by hand or horse, seeds scattered carefully across the earth. Rain would fall, sometimes gently, sometimes not enough. The sun would rise and set again and again, drawing green shoots upward from the soil. Harvest came not with spectacle, but with quiet labor. Sickles swept through golden fields in steady arcs. Sheaves were gathered, tied, stacked. The grain was threshed and winnowed, separated from chaff, stored in sacks and barrels. All of this effort, months of work, of tending and waiting, found its everyday expression in bread. To eat bread was to partake in the rhythm of the land, to taste the patient work of many hands. In towns and cities, bread carried its own quiet structure into daily life. Bakers rose before dawn, lighting ovens slowly, kneading dough in steady rhythm, shaping loaves that would feed neighbors before the sun stood high. The scent of bread drifting through narrow streets was not merely pleasant, it was reassuring. It meant the day had begun properly. It meant sustenance was near. For the wealthy and the poor alike, bread formed the base of most meals. The difference lay in its texture and color. Fine white loaves made from well-sifted wheat flour were softer, lighter, often reserved for those who could afford such refinement. Darker breads made from rye or mixed grains were denser, heartier, more common among laboring families. Yet regardless of shade or softness, bread remained bread. It filled the stomach. It steadied the body. It offered energy for the long hours of work that shaped medieval days, in fields, at looms, and forges along rivers. Often, bread was more than accompaniment. It was the meal itself. A thick slice might cradle stew or pottage, soaking up broth and herbs. It might hold cheese or onions. It might simply be broken and eaten with a little salt. In some homes, stale bread found new life in soups, ensuring nothing was wasted. Even hardened crusts served a purpose, reinforcing the understanding that bread was too valuable to discard. Bread also carried a quiet social meaning. To break bread together was to share not just food, but presence. Meals were communal acts. Families gathered around rough-hewn tables. Workers paused together in the fields. Travelers accepted bread as a gesture of hospitality. Offering bread was an offering of welcome. Refusing it was rarely done. Within monasteries and churches, bread took on spiritual resonance as well. It appeared in ritual and symbol, representing sustenance, not only of the body, but of the soul. The simple loaf, made of ground grain and water, transformed through fire, became something that could signify deeper truths. Yet even outside sacred walls, bread held a kind of reverence born from necessity. There were times when harvests failed, when rain did not come, when frost lingered too long. In such seasons, the absence of bread was felt immediately and deeply. Its scarcity revealed how quietly central it had always been. When bread was plentiful, life felt steadier. When it was scarce, anxiety settled over households and towns alike. Because bread was tied so closely to grain and grain to land, bread was also bound to the rhythms of economy and law. Prices were sometimes regulated to prevent unfairness. Bakers were expected to measure carefully, to weigh accurately. A loaf too small or too light was not merely disappointing. It was a breach of trust. Trust mattered. Because bread mattered. It was the foundation upon which other foods rested. Meat might appear occasionally, fish more regularly in some regions, vegetables according to season. But bread remained the constant thread running through each day. Its texture varied. Its flavor shifted with region and harvest. But its presence endured. There was also a simplicity in bread that spoke to medieval life more broadly. It required only a few ingredients: flour, water, salt, perhaps yeast, yet demanded patience and skill. It could not be hurried. Dough had to rise in its own time. Ovens had to warm slowly. Loaves had to bake fully before they could be broken. In this way, bread mirrored the pace of life itself. Steady, measured, dependent upon the turning of natural cycles rather than sudden speed. The act of baking bread was woven into memory. Children grew up watching dough kneaded, watching loaves placed into ovens, watching crusts emerge, golden and fragrant. The scent of fresh bread became associated with home, with warmth, with safety. Even those who purchased bread from communal ovens or market stalls recognized the same familiar comfort when steam rose from a broken loaf. Bread was humble, and in its humility it was powerful. It sustained bodies through long winters. It marked time through daily repetition. It connected soil to table, farmer to baker, baker to neighbor. To understand medieval life is, in part, to understand bread, not as a luxury or indulgence, but as a steady companion, morning after morning, season after season, year after year. It lay upon tables without fanfare. It filled baskets without ceremony. It was broken, shared, consumed, and made again. And in that quiet cycle, bread held together the fabric of everyday existence, nourishing not only hunger but continuity itself. The rain begins so softly that at first it seems imagined. A faint shifting in the air, a subtle change in scent. Then, almost imperceptibly, the smallest tapping against the bakery's wooden shutters. It is not a sudden downpour. It is a quiet arrival. The sky above the narrow street has drawn itself into a gentle gray, not dark or heavy, but close and comforting, like a woolen cloak pulled lightly around the shoulders of the city. The light dims slightly, softening the edges of rooftops and chimneys until everything feels wrapped in a delicate hush. Outside the bakery door, the first drops land upon the cobblestones. They darken the stone in scattered circles, each one spreading outward in a slow bloom before merging with the next. The ground begins to glisten faintly, reflecting the muted sky in uneven fragments. Inside, the oven continues its steady warmth. The scent of bread lingers in the air. Toasted crust, warm grain, a trace of wood smoke. And now, through the open doorway, comes the cool fragrance of rain touching dust and stone. The two scents meet, warm and cool, dry and newly wet. They blend gently, without conflict. The baker pauses in his work, just for a moment, listening. Rain upon timber makes a different sound than rain upon stone. Against the bakery's sloped roof, it becomes a soft drumming, irregular yet soothing, like fingertips tapping idly against a table. Along the edge of the eaves, droplets gather, swell, and fall in slow succession. Plink, pause, plink. A thin thread of water begins to trace its way down the street's shallow gutter, winding quietly along the slight slope. It carries with it tiny fragments of dust, faint traces of straw, small petals shaken loose from a nearby window box. The market square beyond grows quieter. Canvas awnings sag slightly beneath the accumulating moisture, their fabric darkening as the rain seeps in. Vendors adjust them without urgency, pulling cords tighter, smoothing folds so water can run off in gentle rivulets. There is no alarm. This is not a storm. It is simply rain. Soft, persistent. Steady, a customer entering the bakery shakes droplets from her cloak before stepping inside. The wool releases a faint, earthy scent, mingling with the warmth of the oven. Her cheeks are lightly flushed from the cool air, and a few strands of hair cling damply to her temples. She smiles, inconvenienced, merely aware of the shift in weather. Outside, footsteps become softer as leather soles meet wet stone. The usual echo of movement dulls into something more muted, absorbed by the rain's thin sheen across the ground. The sky remains pale gray, evenly lit, without sharp shadows. The city feels smaller under this covering, closer somehow, as though the rain has drawn rooftops and walls inward into a shared shelter. Along the river, the surface changes. Where it had once reflected clean lines of sky and building, it now ripples with countless tiny circles, each drop creating a brief crown before dissolving into the whole. The mist that lingers there thickens slightly, blurring the boundary between water and air. Back at the bakery, a thin stream begins to slip from the edge of the roof, falling in a clear, continuous ribbon into a barrel placed below. The sound is gentle and repetitive, a steady pouring, not rushed, not forceful, just enough to remind the ear that the sky is speaking. Inside, the fire continues to crackle softly, indifferent to the rain beyond its walls. The contrast deepens the sense of comfort within, warmth contained against the cool dampness outside. The baker moves about slowly, adjusting loaves, wiping the table, tending the embers. The rain seems to slow his gestures further, encouraging an even calmer rhythm. Outside, the market thins slightly. Some customers linger beneath awnings, speaking quietly while they wait. Others walk on, heads bowed slightly, content to let the rain bead upon their cloaks. There is a softness to the entire scene. Colors deepen. The red of apples grows richer, the green of cabbages more saturated, the brown of wooden stalls darker and glossy. Even the stone walls of the buildings appear more vivid, their textures highlighted by the thin film of water tracing their surfaces. A child steps briefly into the rain, hand extended, palm upward. Droplets gather and roll along small fingers before falling away. Laughter rises softly, quickly hushed by a watchful parent guiding them back beneath shelter. The rain does not intensify, it remains gentle, consistent, almost meditative. Over time, the rhythm of it becomes less noticeable, blending into the background like breath or the ticking of a distant clock. It fills the spaces between other sounds. The low murmur of conversation, the quiet shift of wood, the distant roll of a cart. In the narrow alley beside the bakery, water trickles along the uneven stones, finding its path naturally, curving around obstacles without resistance. Moss between the cracks darkens to a deeper green, revived by the moisture. The air grows cooler, fresher. Each inhale feels clean, rinsed of dust. The baker steps to the doorway for a moment, resting his hand against the frame as he looks outward. Raindrops speckle the threshold. The street beyond shimmers faintly, reflecting the pale sky in broken patches. He does not seem concerned. Rain is part of the rhythm, part of the cycle. Grain grows because rain falls. Bread exists because fields are watered. There is a quiet gratitude in this understanding. As the rain continues, the city settles into its slower pace. Humans grow more deliberate. Voices soften further. Even the animals seem content to wait beneath overhangs, their breathing steady, their eyes calm. Inside the bakery, warmth persists. Outside, the rain whispers. And between the two, the steady oven and the steady sky, the world feels balanced, held gently in that delicate space where water meets stone and warmth meets cool air. The rain falls and falls and falls, not with urgency, but with quiet assurance. Evening settles slowly over the narrow street, and with it comes a gentler hush than even the early morning knew. The sky outside the bakery has softened into deep blue, then indigo, then something almost velvety and without edge. The last traces of daylight have slipped quietly behind rooftops and chimneys, leaving only a faint silver memory along the horizon. Inside, the bakery glows, not brightly, not sharply, but with the tender radiance of candlelight. Several candles stand in simple iron holders along the wooden counter and near the hearth. Their flames waver gently, bending and straightening with each subtle shift of air. The light they cast is golden and rounded, touching every surface with warmth and leaving the corners in patient shadow. Stone wall, pale and rough by day, now appear softened, their textures smoothed by the dancing glow. The wooden beams overhead take on a deeper richness, their grain illuminated in warm streaks that seem almost honeyed. The oven, though no longer roaring with flame, still holds the day's heat. A faint warmth radiates from its curved mouth, blending with the mild scent of cooling bread. The scent lingers everywhere. Toasted crust, warm flour, a trace of smoke woven gently through it all. It settles into the air and into the candlelight itself, as though light and aroma have become inseparable. The loaves that remain sit quietly upon their boards, their rounded shapes casting long, soft shadows across the table. Each curve is highlighted along one edge where candlelight touches it, while the other side fades into amber dusk. Nothing here feels hurried. Nothing demands attention. The flicker of flame becomes the slow heartbeat of the room. Wax softens gradually, bending near the wick before forming small, glossy pools that gather and harden again. The movement is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet continuous. The baker moves through this light without disturbing it. His footsteps are muted against the stone floor. When he passes between a candle and the wall, his shadow stretches and shifts, elongating and retreating in silent dance. He pauses at the table, resting his hand lightly upon its worn surface. The wood carries the memory of countless mornings and evenings, its edges rounded by years of touch. In candlelight, even the smallest indentations become visible, tiny valleys where flour once settled. Outside, the street has grown quiet. Occasionally, a passerby's steps echo faintly beyond the door, softened by distance and the thickening night air. The world beyond feels farther away now, separated by darkness and stone. Inside, the bakery is its own small world of warmth. A kettle sits near the hearth, steam rising in thin, delicate threads that catch the candlelight and shimmer briefly before vanishing. The glow reflects faintly in the metal, creating tiny stars upon its surface. The air is calm, barely stirred. When the door opens slightly, perhaps for a final late customer or simply to let in a breath of cooler air, the candles tremble, their flames bowing momentarily before regaining their upright poise. The light shifts with each movement. Shadows lean and sway, then settle again. The baker trims a wick carefully, pinching it between fingers to steady the flame. It brightens briefly, then steadies into a small, unwavering glow. There is something deeply comforting in this limited light. It does not reveal everything at once. It invites the eye to linger, to soften, to accept the quiet. The flour on the table glows faintly, as though dusted with gold rather than white. The iron tools, peels, hooks, and tongs, gleam gently along their edges, reflecting the warm tones around them. The oven's curved dome, once bright with fire, now rests in dim amber shadow, its surface touched here and there by trembling highlights. It feels less like an instrument of heat and more like a guardian of warmth. A candle near the doorway casts a slender beam outward, illuminating the threshold in a pool of soft light. Beyond that pool, the street fades into darkness. The boundary between inside and outside feels gentle but distinct. Within these walls, there is glow. Beyond them, night. The baker sits for a moment on a low stool, hands resting loosely in his lap. His face is half lit, half shadowed, the candlelight tracing the lines shaped by years of work and patience. He breathes slowly. The room breathes with him. The flames continue their quiet movement, never still, yet never frantic. Each one seems to hold a small sun within it, contained and calm. The scent of cooling bread deepens slightly as the crusts release their final warmth into the air. It mingles with the faint sweetness of melting wax, creating an atmosphere that feels close and sheltering. Time stretches here. Minutes pass without announcement. The outside world fades further into silence. Even the smallest sounds, the settling of wood, the soft sigh of air through a crack in the door, feel magnified in the stillness, yet they do not disturb it. They belong to it. The bakery in candlelight is not grand. It is not ornate. It is simple. But in that simplicity lies a profound gentleness. light held carefully in small flames, warmth preserved in stone and bread, silence shaped not by emptiness, but by contentment. As one candle burns lower, its flame dipping closer to the wax, another stands steady nearby, ensuring that darkness never quite overtakes the room. The glow remains, soft, golden, unhurried. And in that glow, the bakery rests, wrapped in warmth and quiet, as night settles fully beyond its door. Night comes to medieval London not in a single sweep, but in a slow and patient settling, as though the city itself exhales and allows darkness to gather gently in its streets. The last colors of sunset fade from the sky, withdrawing behind the uneven line of rooftops and chimneys. What remains is a deepening blue that gradually thickens into velvet shadow. Windows that once glowed faintly with firelight begin to dim one by one, shutters closing with soft wooden clicks that echo briefly, then disappear. The day's sounds grow thinner. A cartwheel rolls past for the final time, its low rumble dissolving into the distance. Hooves strike stone more softly now, unhurried, carrying their riders homeward. Voices that earlier filled the market square drift into doorways and vanish behind timber walls. The city does not fall silent abruptly. It eases into stillness. Along the river, the Thames continues its steady motion, though its surface now reflects only scattered lantern light and the faint shimmer of stars. Boats tied securely to their posts rock gently in the dark water, their ropes creaking in slow rhythm. The mist returns, light and silvery, settling low over the banks and drifting through narrow lanes that slope toward the river's edge. It wraps itself around stone walls and curls beneath wooden archways, softening the outlines of familiar structures. In the marketplace, empty stalls stand in quiet rows. Their canvas awnings, folded and tied, rest without movement. The day's scattered straw lies undisturbed across the cobblestones, and the scent of herbs and bread has faded into something faint and lingering. A final door closes. A latch settles into place. Inside homes, candles burn lower. Families gather near hearths, speaking softly in the warmth of firelight. The glow from within spills briefly through cracks and shutters before dimming entirely. One by one, the lights go out. Above, the sky clears. Stars appear slowly, scattered across the darkness in patient clusters. Without the brightness of modern lamps, the night sky feels immense, almost close enough to touch, stretching wide above the city's sleeping roofs. A watchman walks his route along the city wall, lantern swinging gently at his side. The flame within flickers but remains steady, casting a small golden circle upon the ground before him. His footsteps are measured and even, the soft scrape of leather against stone marking time in a way that feels almost ceremonial. He pauses occasionally, listening. There is little to hear now. The distant lap of water against the riverbank, the faint rustle of wind passing through narrow alleys. A horse shifting in its stable, releasing a low breath that clouds briefly in the cool air. Even the animals seem subdued, their movements slow and restful. In the narrowest streets, darkness gathers thickly between leaning houses. The timber frames cast long shadows that merge into one another until the lane feels like a single, unbroken ribbon of night. A cat moves silently along a wall, paws light against stone. It pauses, ears tilted, then disappears beneath a cart, swallowed by shadow. The scent of the city changes after dark. The sharper smells of the market recede. In their place comes the cool fragrance of damp stone and river air, mingled faintly with smoke from banked hearths that glow low but persistent. The wind moves carefully through the streets, as though unwilling to disturb the quiet. It brushes gently against shuttered windows and slips beneath doorways, carrying with it the chill of late evening. Somewhere far off, a church bell sounds a single hour. Its tone travels clearly through the stillness, round and resonant, lingering in the air before dissolving into silence once more. Then, nothing. The city rests. Roofs that sheltered noise and movement throughout the day now cradle sleep. Within, breathing slows. Dreams begin to shape themselves in quiet rooms where only the faintest ember glow remains. Even the river seems to lower its voice, its steady flow becoming a distant murmur beneath the vast canopy of stars. The watchman continues his slow circuit, lantern light marking his path in small increments. He passes shuttered shops and closed gates, nodding to fellow guards in silent acknowledgement. There is comfort in this repetition. Comfort in knowing the city has settled safely into the arms of night. The air grows cooler as hours pass. Dew forms along the edges of rooftops and gathers upon wooden beams. It beads upon the cobblestones, catching the starlight in tiny trembling points. Time stretches, unbroken, unhurried. No carts roll, no merchants call, no hammers strike. The silence deepens until even the smallest sound, a loose shutter tapping once against its frame, a mouse rustling through straw, feels magnified before fading again. Above the city wall, the constellations drift slowly westward. The moon, if present, casts a pale sheen over the Thames, turning its dark surface into a ribbon of silver. London, once vibrant with trade and movement, now feels almost tender in its stillness. The timbered houses lean toward one another in quiet companionship. Stone churches stand unmoving, their towers reaching upward into the star-strewn sky. The night holds everything gently. There is no urgency here, only rest. Only the steady breathing of a city that has completed its day and now gathers strength for another. And so medieval London becomes silent. Not empty, not abandoned, but peacefully at ease, wrapped in shadow and starlight, waiting patiently for the first soft hint of dawn to begin again.